So first of all, I wanted to thank our sponsors, and especially our biggest dollar sponsors, Cotu and Felicis, who are also investors in Weights and Biases. And I just wanted to say, honestly, they've been great investors, and specifically, they pushed us to do this conference, which we were terrified of doing. We tried to get out of it, but they were totally right. I'm so glad that we did this. So thank you, Cotu and Felicis. It was a great idea. And thanks to all of our other sponsors. You all signed up having no idea how many people were going to show up. We had no idea either. You should definitely check out their booths in the back. I also want to give a shout out to our amazing speakers. We have awesome talks lined up today. Every single one of them are talks that I'm personally excited about seeing. And finally, I wanted to give a shout out to all of our users. This conference and this talk is really for you. I'm curious, can you just do this for me? How many people are users of Weights and Biases? Tell me. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I'm Lukas. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Weights and Biases. And at Weights and Biases, we've been on a mission to build the best tools for machine learning practitioners. And today, I want to talk about, one, the progress that we've made over the past 5 years against our mission, and two, our perspective on large language models or foundation models, and our vision on how our product evolves to help make LLMs work in the real world. So Weights and Biases' mission has been remarkably similar since we started. And I think that's because Sean and Chris and I have always cared so much about the power of machine learning and the chance to help companies really make machine learning work in the real world. And we started Weights and Biases in 2018, but we had actually been doing machine learning and building machine learning tools since 2003. And so when we started Weights and Biases, we did have a sense of the problem that we were solving. And we articulate it this way from the very beginning, right? There's software 1.0, which I always feel a little bit saying, but Andrej Karpathy said it, so if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. Software 1.0 we call the way of developing software that's been around for 70 years. And in the past 20 years, we've seen just an explosion of developer tools. Software 2.0 is the machine learning software development that all of us in this room are doing. And it has some similarities, some similar problems, but it uses surprisingly few of the developer tools written for software 1.0. And so when we started Weights and Biases, we had two core theses, and they actually were both controversial at the time. Our first thesis was just that software 2.0 needed a different set of tools. And this really was controversial. This is the first thing that our friends asked us, that our investors asked us, do you really need a different set of tools for machine learning? The workflows look similar. Why would ML need its own CI/CD system? And our response was just that, the workflow is known, the pain points are known, they've been known for years, and yet nobody is using the existing tools for ML. Like, models are so crucial to ML development, but nobody puts their models in GitHub. And fundamentally, I think this is because machine learning development, as you know, is a lot different than software development. Software development feels like engineering. It's so fun. It's so satisfying, right? Every step you make generally takes you closer to a goal, whereas machine learning is more of an exploration. And that's a really deep difference that makes your pain different and makes the tools that you want different. And our second core thesis, related, was that we wanted to build tools for the ML practitioners specifically, the people building and using the ML models. And this was in real contrast to our competitors at the time, who were uniformly building for executives or building for organizations doing ML. And so they would talk about democratizing AI all the time, and that's something we care about too. But democratizing AI to our competitors was basically like, wow, these ML experts are really expensive. Maybe we could automate them out of a job and just make ML without any ML practitioners. And so as our competition built an end-to-end platform, which totally makes sense. Every executive that I talk to has wanted to buy one tool. They always say, look, I don't want to piece together things. I want to buy one end-to-end platform. We asked the practitioners what they wanted, and they wanted specific solutions to real problems that they had. And so we started with a single pain point, and we picked that pain point to be experiment tracking. And I think we picked it intuitively because it was the thing that ML practitioners felt the most, and it was the thing that executives and VCs understood the least. And so, now everyone loves, they call it PLG, right? Like selling to individual contributors and then rolling it up into a deal. And everyone loves machine learning tools. But I swear to you, 5 years ago, investors told me ML practitioners have no budget. And there's probably only 1,000 practitioners there. Now we have a few thousand people in a room watching this talk just in San Francisco. And just to pull like kind of one think piece from the time, I don't know if any of you remember this, your deep learning tools for enterprises startup will fail is literally a popular Medium article that came out. And it wasn't a crazy article. It actually made sense. There's a subtle point and a true point that the author is making here, which is, look, deep learning applications are super disparate. Every company does it differently. Every data set needs its own way to evaluate it. Every application needs a different type of analysis. Every use case needs a different visualization to work with it. And you know what? Our first year post-launch, it felt like Clemens was right. This is our actual graph of active users post-launch. And you can see that our weekly count 1 year in, this is really for the early stage entrepreneurs in the audience, our weekly user count was 23. But I was honestly looking at this like, man, this graph is going up. I like this. But no one else felt that way. And we didn't really know what to do. We kind of just continued to do what was intuitive to us. And Carrie, who's here today, worked deeply. We all work deeply with our heaviest users. We emphasize the happiest users. And this is a photo I love of Carrie on site with Peter at OpenAI. And I think the reason I love it was because we noticed here that OpenAI actually had a weights and biases dashboard up on their wall. And that gave us some hope. We thought, well, maybe there's only 23 users we can count, but some people are walking by that and looking at the dashboard. So that's kind of like a user. We also tracked feedback from the very beginning and listened carefully. And then we saw that people really liked our product, but they kept saying, our friends kept saying, I don't know, I haven't tried it yet, I haven't gotten around to it. And we kept taking away excuses for not using our product. And so we really feel proud that we've gotten it down to a 60-second integration to get something useful out of weights and biases. And actually, in order to do that, we had to integrate with everything out there, everything that ML practitioners are already using. We actually have a lot of our integration partners here today. And as we continued to work on this, we started to hear from our customers, hey, we think you spent too much time on experiment tracking. We like the experiment tracking. Can you take the same approach and solve some of my other pain points? And so the first thing we did was we built sweeps to help optimize models. We built artifacts to help version data in pipelines. We built tables to prep and visualize data. This is like a 5-year product roadmap I'm summarizing in 5 seconds here. We built models. We launched that a few months ago as a model registry, and we built automations, just shipped that very recently, to do CI/CD. But I think the important thing that I wanted to emphasize is in that process of building these specific solutions, we started to realize that there were underlying pieces that were actually bigger than the individual solutions that were necessary to make this work across all of our customers. And the first thing is we had to make it work inside of large companies. So we had to support managed cloud. We had to support a way that folks didn't have to send all their data to weights and biases to get the value out of the analysis. And we realized that actually 70, 80% of our customer base doing machine learning is enterprise. And I think even as ML becomes more mainstream, security and privacy become more and more critical, not less. The second thing is, and this was a real surprise to us, when you're doing a machine learning experimental workflow, the work product is actually the things that you're learning. And so you want to share those learnings with the other parts of your team. Like that's actually the core IP that you generate. And so we built reports to support collaboration everywhere. We also learned that when you're doing an experimental workflow, you often want to go back and understand what a colleague did. And that colleague is often your previous self 6 weeks ago or 6 months ago. And so making reproducibility even possible is critical and often overlooked. And then finally, Clemens was totally right that every application needs a different analysis and a different visualization. And so we worked super hard to figure out how to let our users, let our customers build their own visualizations that they needed to get the analysis they needed to do. And so now I feel super proud that we really are a full MLOps platform. But in that process of building, I feel like we've kept our core tenets of simplicity and interoperability and focus on developers. And I feel a little shy showing this slide, but I feel so proud of it. At our first user conference, I just want to show you the customer appreciation that I really appreciate the positive things that people have said. And it's kind of exactly what we hoped they said. Like at Toyota Research, Weights and Biases uses the official record of every ML model. And Adrian's talking later, so you can ask him if he still believes that after he said it. And that graph actually got a lot better. So the qualitative feedback was good for a long time, but then actually it turned into massive user growth that you always dream of as an entrepreneur, never get. Yeah. But honestly, the thing that I feel most proud of is the diversity and breadth of the customers using Weights and Biases. People ask me, what's the best part, the most fun part of running Weights and Biases? And it's so clear to me that it's having front row seats to this explosion of ML applications. Like, I remember a lot of us, coming out of college, the interesting ML applications out there is you could rank ads or you could try to make money on Wall Street, right? And now we see ML teams making awesome games, making organic farming easier, making better medicine, making customer support less annoying. Like, we just live vicariously through all the amazing things that our customers are doing. And honestly, investors still actually ask me about the TAM of the market, but I just don't worry about it because I don't think there's any company out there of significant size that at this point is not doing ML in some shape or form. And we know this because we see it across every industry. People are using Weights and Biases. So we feel so proud of that work. But then what came along next is probably the reason that so many of you are here, which is this huge shock to our industry, which is the explosion of LLMs. And I'm sure that's what many of you are here to talk about, and that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this presentation. I think the best way I've heard of putting what's happened in LLMs is something Sequoia said, which is it is a Cambrian explosion. I think that's a great metaphor. And I think back to when everyone started building Facebook apps and there was so much excitement, or when iOS came out and everyone was building those apps. And this feels like that, but it feels like a million times bigger than that. And the amazing thing is that this technology really works in a tangible way. Suddenly, natural language interfaces to products are not annoying. Suddenly, like, chatbots are something that I want to engage with. And honestly, I can fill these slides with these incredible images in the background, basically just for fun at the last minute. And the crazy thing also to realize is this tech has only been out for a couple months. So there's obviously so much disruption that's about to happen everywhere. And it's such a cliche as a tech CEO to talk about disruption and innovation. I don't know how to emphasize this enough. I think some of us might miss it. This really is a special moment in tech that I have never seen in my career. And I really think this is a moment that our grandkids will be asking us about. What was it like when LLMs first came out? And so what's happened with that is an explosion of LLMOps developer tools. It's interesting to think about ML, which was around for decades before I think the real first production ML application. And then ML applications were around for at least a decade before anyone coined the term MLOps. And then MLOps was actually around for quite a while before any investor made an infographic of MLOps companies. But LLMOps has exploded on a very accelerated timescale. There's been, this is not like raising for MLOps 5-6 years ago. There's actually been an explosion of LLMOps developer tools infographics. There's so many tools that everyone can put out an infographic, and it might make you think, wow, maybe we're at peak hype, especially when you consider the fact that almost none of these LLM applications are in production yet. So none of these LLM companies are making money yet, and yet there's enough developer tools to fill a market map just serving these non-money-making entities. How could this be? And I think my explanation is no one read my think piece. Your LLM tools for enterprise startups will fail. But honestly, even though I understand why people think that there's hype and there is hype, I actually think that we might be even underestimating what's going on. In fact, a question that we keep asking ourselves is, does it matter to build the best tools for machine learning practitioners if GPT-4 can outperform models on a ton of different use cases? Is anyone going to be building models in the next year or two? And when we think about machine learning practitioners, we go back to our original definition, which is in our onboarding documentation. And I think it's notable that we didn't define machine learning practitioner as someone who builds neural networks or builds boosted trees. We think about someone who's actually trying to make machine learning do something. So our quick assessment is that LLMs unlock the ability of almost anyone, at least any software developer, to be a machine learning practitioner. And in fact, we see this in our own internal data. So when we first started the company, literally everyone was an ML researcher or a machine learning engineer. And today, when we take a sample of our users and we look at their titles on LinkedIn, we see that over half of our users look more like software engineers or founders or product managers than traditional ML engineers or researchers. And we expect this trend to accelerate. People have been talking a lot about the democratization of AI, but I think this is the form that you're seeing it, and I think it's finally happening, and we plan to embrace it. We have a slightly more subtle perspective on what happens to ML practitioners, which is that we think it splits into 3 personas. And today, you might actually be all 3 of these personas, but I think that they're going to start to diverge. So first of all, we have LLM creators, which are building the foundation models that other people use. LLM fine-tuners that are taking the models and training them on their own data. And then finally, LLM users, maybe this is some people call prompt engineers, that take the LLMs and make them do something useful without retraining them. So how do we think about these 3 personas, and what are we doing for these 3 personas? First of all, LLM creators, the people making the LLMs, we love working with you. We've worked super hard to make weights and biases scalable for large distributed models, and we're really proud that we work with almost all of the organizations that have built important foundation models. This is NVIDIA, this is Anthropic, Mosaic, Stability, Midjourney, Hugging Face, Meta, OpenAI, a lot that aren't household names now, but maybe in the future. And I think that innovation here is super important, and innovation comes from lots of different people trying it. So we are excited to, as best we can, help democratize the building of LLMs. Unfortunately, we can't make GPUs cheaper. But we can help share insights. And Boris is actually here today. Shout out to Boris if you're in the audience. I saw him earlier. Boris was the first person to really do this, where he built his own version of DALL-E Mini, completely by himself. And he tracked everything out in the open. So you can actually go see exactly what he was doing. And then I think this inspired Eleuther to train all of their models in public. So every single experiment that Eleuther does, and by the way, they make GPT-J, GPT-NeoX. If you're fine-tuning probably one of the models you're using, you can see every detail of every run they did, whether it was successful or unsuccessful. And to me, this is science happening in public, and we love to support this. And so for people, we hear a lot of this. If you're just thinking about training an LLM from scratch, we combined all the best practices that we heard from all our customers doing it and put it into a white paper that we've made publicly available. And so we will absolutely help you train your own LLM, because I think it's good for the world for people to try it, and it's good for our business when people try it. But honestly, you probably shouldn't be training your own LLM. You probably should at least be fine-tuning one of the many existing fantastic LLMs. Which leads me to the LLM fine-tuners. And this is, I think, the bulk of our users today. And I just want to say, if you're fine-tuning an LLM, we have products for you. We have awesome products for you. First of all, we have an integration with Hugging Face, which is actually a 0-line integration. So if you just import weights and biases, you will suddenly get visualizations of all the hardware you're using, all the loss curves, how well your model is doing as it trains over time. Inevitably, you're going to want to tune hyperparameters, and most people do this totally ad hoc. This wastes a ton of money. It wastes a ton of time. So we've made sweeps so easy, you have no excuse for not doing a principled hyperparameter search. When you're fine-tuning LLMs, you're going to want to track data, so you can use artifacts for that. The data tracking gets more complicated when you're chaining together models, when you're fine-tuning over and over. You can have an immutable record of how every single model was trained in your system. You're going to do data exploration. There's no doubt about it. Weights and biases tables is like an interactive data frame backed by a database. And it's not just text and numbers. You can see images, graphs, molecules, even custom visualizations. And finally, Carrie showed you the model registry, but this works great for fine-tuning, especially well for fine-tuning. You can run a standard set of tests before anything goes into production. But I think the most important constituent, the fastest growing constituent, and probably long-term the biggest constituent here is the LLM users. And we are really, really excited to support the LLM users, but it presents us with a significant new challenge, a different challenge that we haven't seen at Weights and Biases, because we knew deeply the ML workflow, but I honestly think no one really knows the LLM workflow. I think we're figuring it out together right now. So there are some pain points that we know about. Prompt engineering is a pain point, model selection is a pain point, and we will build for those pain points, but I think the workflow is changing right now. And so what do? First of all, we've put out a course available to all of you, best practices, latest best practices for using LLMs, and you can access it in our other MLOps courses at this link here, wb.me/courses. This has really served us in the past because we don't just learn by teaching, we learn from watching what our students do. We also very quickly shipped a product called Prompts. So this helps LLM users track and debug the prompts that they're making and putting in front of LLMs, especially in the context of multiple steps chained together. We made a great integration with LangChain, and the LangChain founder Harrison is speaking later, and a great integration with OpenAI, so it's super easy to use. But I would not claim that this solves every problem you have. And so we're thinking about how do we build a cohesive end-to-end platform for LLM users. And in thinking about this, we go back to kind of the core needs of the people doing these things. And again, we look at this where we see writing code versus building models, this experimental workflow versus this very specific building style of workflow, and how LLM users fits into that. And I would argue that building models and using models has a very different kind of experiment, but they're both very, very experimental, iterative workflows. And when experiments are the important thing, the speed that you can get feedback is always the limiting factor. So tightening up that cycle where you can get feedback faster is the most important thing for productivity. And the second thing is that the learning that you do along the way really is your product. It really is your IP. And so making it easy to save and share that IP is crucial to being successful when you're building LLMs or when you're using LLMs. And so because the core of the workflow is the same with building LLMs and using LLMs, the core of our infrastructure I actually think works really well today for using LLMs. So experiment tracking, so both use cases need reproducibility, flexibility, and collaboration. Enterprise keeps us secure at every step. Reports is still great for collaboration when you're using LLMs. Launch is great for use of reproducibility. We launched this recently, and we've already built an LLM evaluation use case on top of it that you can really use. And then finally, Weave is the part of our architecture that lets us build powerful visualizations. And it's super flexible, and so opening up to the world has been really hard. And we've been working on this for actually several years. So we use Weave internally to build our own tools quickly, like Prompts that I showed you, and we're going to continue to use it to build our own tools. But we know that we can't build tools that every ML team needs to use. And so we want to make this available to more people so that you can build the own things, the own analyses that you need to be successful in whatever kind of application you have. And it's a hard thing to show, but we want to show it to you through amazing applications that we've built on top of it. And so if all you take away is just these exciting applications that you can use, that's great. But we also want you to know that you can make your own applications. And to give you an extended introduction to Weave, here is my co-founder, Sean. It's his brainchild. Thank you.